All right, good morning. Just one committee meeting this morning, so we're moving right along. This will call to order the regular meeting of the Board of Directors of the Regional Transportation Authority. Let's say the Pledge of Allegiance first. Thank you.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Last night when Leanne and myself and Jeremy were driving back after a evening session of the House Appropriations Committee, I got a little kick out of the fact that the Nashville Predators asked everyone to sing as loudly as they could the national anthem so that the Chicago Blackhawks fans who normally cheer during Jim Corneliuson's rendition of the Star Spangled Banner couldn't be heard. So I was laughing at that, and the people of Nashville must not have sang loud enough because the Blackhawks won in double overtime, which is good. Will the Secretary, Audrey, will you please call the roll?
Sure. Director Anderson?
Here.
Director Buchanan?
Here.
Director Colson?
Here.
Director DeWitt?
Here.
Director Durrani?
Here.
Director Frega?
Here.
Director Fuentes?
Here.
Director Hobson?
Here.
Director Lewis? Director McGallis?
Here.
Director Melvin? Director Payne?
Here.
Director Ross?
Here.
Director Totten?
Here.
Director Triani?
Here.
Chairman Dillard?
Here.
We have a quorum of 14 present with 2 absent.
Great, thank you. I want to remind the board that we are now in the 21st century, so audio-wise and through the World Wide Web, we are out there, and which just is a reminder to turn on your microphones when and get recognized in the proper fashion. I want to congratulate Sarah Pang, a woman who must never sleep, but Sarah is the chairwoman of Mayor Rahm Emanuel's transition team, which is good, which means we, along with Forrest Claypool from the CTA, who is a member of the mayor's transition team, at least mass transit will be a known commodity during that transition. But I wish you well, and you're amazing before you took on that assignment. But it's a big assignment, and we very much admire people who step up from their corporate jobs to civically serve on the RTA, or especially take on the daunting task for Mayor Emanuel. So congratulations.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
With that, let's approve the minutes from our March 19th meeting. Are there any questions or comments on those minutes? If there's not, is there a motion and a second for those minutes? It's been moved by Director Hobson, seconded by Director Trioni, that we approve the minutes of March 19th. Let's take a recorded vote there, so we've got a recorded vote for the record, if we could, Madam Secretary.
Director Anderson?
Yes.
Director Buchanan?
Yes.
Director Colson?
Yes.
Director DeWitt?
Yes.
Director Durrani?
Yes.
Director Frega?
Aye.
Director Fuentes?
Aye.
Director Hobson?
Yes.
Director McGallis?
Aye.
Director Payne?
Yes.
Director Ross?
Aye.
Director Totten?
Yes.
Director Triani?
Aye.
Chairman Dillard?
Yes.
14 ayes and 2 absent.
Thank you very much, Madam Secretary. That'll become our baseline roll call, hopefully, for today. The next is the public segment, or public comment segment of the meeting. I believe we have one speaker today, Mr. Blakemore. If you are around, is Mr. Blakemore here? If not, he may think it's later. If he comes in, we may go out of order to have him, but he was the one recorded person we thought might want to speak to us today. Item number 5 is the Executive Director's report. Executive Director Leanne Redden.
Morning. So we'll just dive right in. I'll just do that. I hate the mouse. So just to start off where we always start off, currently the state owes us $248 million. We will continue, as always, to work with them to make sure we receive those monies as timely as possible. Recently, just last week on April 9th, the RTA joined with the service boards and Amtrak to celebrate Stand Up for Transportation Day. The board probably recalls we passed a resolution in last month's board meeting. This was a national event across the country, led primarily by transit agencies, but partnering with many of our other transportation officials and organizations. It was actually a very successful event. We held it at Union Station, so Amtrak was our co-host. The focus of the event was to highlight the ending of the federal transportation bill on May 31st and the need for long-term stable funding going forward to support transportation. We were very lucky to have a very strong congressional presence. We had Senator Dick Durbin speak, Congressman Lipinski, Congressman Mike Quigley, Bill Foster, and Congressman Bob Dole as well were all in attendance and gave some great remarks. I think the key remark that I liked the best was, I think, Senator Durbin, and I'm paraphrasing, I won't be as eloquent as he was, basically saying today we stand up for transportation and tomorrow Congress needs to man up. And stand up and vote for a long-term transportation bill. So I think that was a great event, great coordination. I want to thank, actually, Susan Massal and her staff for the efforts that they put together to pull this off, and then the coordination with the service boards. I know the service boards actually really appreciated the event, and we got some great kudos from them as well for pulling that together. So I think it was well received. We also had participation from CMAP, Metropolitan Planning Council, Access Living, and councils of governments from around the region. We also heard some comments from the chairman, Forrest Claypool, Karen Tamley, a PACE board member, and also the head of the Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities, as well as, who am I forgetting? Oh, Tom Carper, the past chairman and current board member of Amtrak. So it was a very well-rounded event. Moving on to the state picture. As you know, the General Assembly recently passed 2 legislative measures that reduced the general revenue spending across the board. It also swept a number of special state funds to plug the $1.6 billion hole in the state budget for fiscal year 2015. The RTA continues to work with many officials at the state level to understand what that will mean and what impact that will have on transit. We're still waiting to hear specifically how those fund sweeps will actually impact us, and we'll continue to keep you apprised of that as those conversations develop. We do know that there's only actually one concrete piece that we know, that they did cut one of their paratransit grants, which was the result of a cut to GRF, but it was the only concrete cut we know of now was for $105,000, so we'll be okay on that front. But we don't want to kind of let our hair down. There are other items that are still being discussed. They did a $250 million fund sweep out of the road fund, which could potentially impact 2 of our grants, our operating grants that our region receives. That includes the reimbursement, reduced fare reimbursement grant that the RTA receives and passes on to the service boards, as well as the ADA paratransit grant. That part of that gets funded out of this road fund. The Department of Transportation, and actually Jeremy and I sat down with the Secretary of Transportation last Friday, as well as the Deputy Secretary and other key budget staff, to sort of talk through all of this. And they have informed us that they will keep us up to date as decisions are made, but those decisions as to how those fund sweeps will actually sort of be executed have not been made yet. So we'll keep working. And similarly, there was a fund sweep of $40 million to the County Mass Transit District Fund, as well as the State and Local Sales Tax Reform Fund, both of which also are funds that provide operating grant assistance to the RTA or to the transit agencies. And so we'll continue to monitor that and see how those play out as well. Moving on to D.C., Congress is now back after a couple of week spring break. And on March 26, Ways and Means Chairman Paul Ryan told reporters that the House will enact another short-term extension for the Highway Trust Fund, not the long-term stable funding solution that we are all pushing for. He didn't give any indication as to the duration of that extension. and I think more importantly, where the monies would come from to fund that short-term extension. As I said, we continue to push for a long-term stable bill to address these capital funding issues. The Congressional Budget Office also projects that current spending levels for the Highway Trust Fund will remain solvent just through July. So and that's when Congress traditionally starts their 4 to 5 week recess. Interesting timing, so we'll see how all that plays out over the next few months. An extension through September would require about $3 billion. An extension through December 31st would cost several billion more. So, there's a large price tag to even some of these short-term fixes. The biggest issue, the long-term funding still remains unclear. We continue to work and working on the growing sponsorship of House Bill 990, which is the Commuter Parity Act legislation that would bring transit parity back up to the parking levels and provide that benefit to regions across the country. The Illinois delegation has been pretty strong in support of that, so we'll continue to work with them. Getting America to Work has also been closely working with coalition members on the Stand Up for Transportation event. So our event was echoed with many of our partners that we continue to work with at the federal level. We, as a group, offered sort of guidance and some of the press event materials that we were developing and shared that with them to help them use in their local areas. Also provided them sort of op-ed draft documents as well as guided them with the use of social media. The April 9 event was very well received and got a lot of hits in the social media space, both on Twitter and Facebook. So we continue to build that social media base for supporting our efforts. At, I think, everybody's place, you have a little brochure. We'd like to invite you to check out the new and improved Rtams 4.0 website, which is really our data portal. As you know, it's a great sort of one-stop shop for all types of information about our transit system and the RTA information. Over the last few months, staff have made several pretty significant and I think really well-received updates to the system, making it faster and easy to navigate. It makes it better for us, sort of in the planning spaces, not just us and the service boards to use, but then the general public and others who are interested in using that data. The mapping technology, connecting sort of data to actual visual maps and usable maps, I think has been significantly enhanced. Just a couple of minutes on a Chicago visitor survey that we conducted last summer. You recall that we engaged in a survey of the visitor market in our region. It was a federally funded, federal? Yes. Yeah, we got some federal fundings to do that. And we looked at 19 locations around the region to better understand the travel market. People didn't choose Chicago and others know a lot about the travel market, but nobody understood actually their travel patterns in terms of getting to and in and around our region, in terms, especially specifically in the public transit space. So we engaged in this survey. Some of the key focus areas, not surprisingly, are around Museum Campus, Millennium Park, Brookfield Zoo, as well as both airports. We learned a lot of information. We continue now to work with the key visitor and tourist bureaus around our region to share that information. We really learned a lot of information about people understanding sort of the value of the transit system, and how they find it convenient or not, sort of their stress levels engaging with it. We also got a better sense on visitors why they're not using transit, in some of the scenarios where they could consider what are their barriers to accessing the transit system, which really helps us kind of define how we also promote, market, and provide information. And actually looked at some specific market opportunity areas where we believe we can actually grow transit ridership with some key groups. Like I said, we'll continue to work with all the transit agency, the tourism industry to help share that information and work in cross purposes to better serve. We will be sending you a board briefing document that gets into more of the statistical analysis and the details and the results of that survey, but I won't go into those here today. The Shuttle Bug Program, I know some of you recall that we launched an expansion of the Shuttle Bug Program, and that's if you will, sort of that last mile or few connection from the fixed route services that we have, typically focused on the reverse commute market. The first expansion beyond, there's that whole nugget of services up in sort of the Lake Cook area, connecting off Metro service. We have done launched our first expansion, serving from Metra to the Esplanade area office campus, connecting from the Belmont station in Downers Grove, a great reverse commute opportunity that we have hit the market kind of strong, I think, and it's continuing to grow. There is a couple of private shuttles that we're running, and they're going to the campuses that were funding those are ending those at the end of this month, I believe it is, and we'll be migrating those customers onto this, and those businesses in turn will be helping support the funding and the operations of this. It's been a great effort with us and PACE, as well as Metra. They did an adjustment to their schedule to accommodate this, and we look to kind of replicate that and grow these opportunities across the region. We also shared with the board an update on the ADA 25 Chicago activities. We sent a board briefing out to you. We continue to work with a regional initiative primarily sponsored by the Chicago Community Trust. We have been an active partner. The purpose of this is to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the passing of the Americans with Disabilities Act and continue to work to improve access across our region for people with disabilities. We are featuring public engagement and legacy projects related to employment, education, community, inclusion, and technology. Specifically, we are focusing on access to transit. We continue to partner with the service boards to increase awareness of the accessibility and usability of public transportation in the region, and internal activities including awareness training for both RTA staff, and we'll be also giving you guys a more detailed briefing as board members in these fronts. And we'll continue to keep you apprised of those activities as they go forward. That concludes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Again, I want to thank the staff for the Stand Up for Transportation rally that was well attended. Got excellent coverage from that. Director Totten.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This may be not the appropriate time to bring this up, but I did briefly discuss with Leanne the other day the problem of mandates, both federal and state mandates, most of which are unfunded. But we can't lobby either the state or federal government to get them funded now because nobody has any money. So I think that's fruitless. But my query is this. Have we ever reviewed some of these mandates, which are long, some probably go back 20 years, as to whether they're still useful, still appropriate, what they are costing, and should there be any effort made maybe to after a review of some mandates to maybe, I guess for lack of a better word, liquidate them to save some money. And I just bring that up as a general query and wonder whether there's any merit in maybe doing that.
Yes, we're always looking at what activities we have on our plate, how can we deliver those and in the most efficient manner. And so as part of that conversation, we are always looking at, are there things that we could move away from, do more efficiently, partner with somebody else. It's always an agenda item on any program that we administer. So yes, it is that level of sort of scrutiny, I think, gets heightened as budgets get tighter, and that we have to consider, doing as much as we can with the limited resources that we have. So we continue to look at all those programs, and are there ways that we could more efficiently or more cheaply provide certain services, or find better ways of doing them.
Is there an inventory of mandates?
Do I have a sort of a list on my desk? No, not specifically, but we have a list. I mean, and mandate is sort of a very broad term. I mean, in some cases we're required by law and long-standing law, or some of these items represent sort of what's the word? What's the phrase I'm looking for? I can't think what I'm trying to say. Civil rights, thank you, responsibilities that we have. And so we are not looking to back away from those kinds of responsibilities. But again, we are also always looking at ways to provide those services as efficiently as possible.
I guess I'm driving at maybe doing a, for lack of a better, cost-benefit study on some of these mandates. I mean, a lot of them, and both Chairman Dillard and myself know that some of them are stunts put together by legislators sponsoring something for some problem that's long gone, it no longer exists. And that's the area I'm trying to get at, is to maybe update the mandates that are costing us, or probably off the top of your head, Leanne, you and your staff could probably think of about a dozen of them that might come to your attention right away that maybe are worth taking a look at.
We are, and we continue, especially as we, like I said, as we're looking at these tight budgets and some of these budget negotiations, reviewing all of those.
Just to piggyback before I recognize Director McGallis, I mean, that's an excellent question, Senator Totten. Leanne, a couple of ideas. I do think you ought to send, and I don't care who on the staff does it, but we ought to request each of the service boards, in light of sitting through that hearing yesterday, are there mandates that they would like to be relieved from them? We ought to ask them those questions. And then we, Leanne, are clearly going to need your and the staff's recommendations on what relief we're going to ask for, if any, on the state's reduced and free ride program, for lack of a better word, the Blagojevich program. If they're gonna cut our money for that, we at least ought to ask for some relief. And it's not as easy as you think when you get in there. It's very, very murky. I will tell you, when we were in Washington, the U.S. Department of Transportation said, and this is their quote, not mine, Mr. Chairman, that the governor's proposed cuts to ADA paratransit cannot be made. It's not a transportation issue, it is a civil rights issue, and it's been litigated in the courts, and you cannot cut that. And they use the term, it's a civil rights issue. But if there are mandates that you think we ought to look at, now's the time to try to get relief and get some of these things off of the books. But the one we really got to have an answer on is the history of the free and reduced rides program. But let's survey and see what else is out there. And the mandates keep coming, Director Totten. The biggest one that's out there now is Barbara Boxer, Senator Boxer from California's plan to have positive train control on Metra. I was in the cab of a Metra locomotive last week, and I already saw Leanne and staff physically. They have the boxes in some of the locomotives. That's a $400 million mandate. That's a heavy hit. So the mandates keep coming, and positive train control is wonderful. It's just, how do you pay it? And if you're going to heap it on us, could we have some help getting it done? And it's one that's coming, and it will make our rails safer. But all of life is a balancing act. So let's do give. I mean, I think.
And I have a standing meeting that I have with the executive directors. That meeting is next week, so I can certainly add that to the agenda. There's a variety of different mandates, these kinds of projects at both the federal and at the state level that we can talk about.
Especially the state, since that's going to be really the first focus. The state will be May and June, and it looks like the feds are going to kick things until the fall. Director McGallis.
Mr. Chairman, you touched on the very thing I wanted to talk about, and I just want to second what Director Totten has mentioned, and the need to look at unfunded mandates. And right now, we want to know what they're going to be. Like you said, the state budget's coming down to where we're being asked to make cuts to the budget. lack of discretionary funds for the ride-free program or the half-fare program. If you're going to reduce or take away the source of funding, give us the authority then to act one way or the other, either to continue it as a priority over other programs or the ability at the local level to make a decision how we're going to move forward, rather than just simply the money's gone, but you keep up the mandate because we say under legislation you have to do it. So
Just one other cute story from yesterday's committee hearing. Representative Al Riley, who is the former chairman of the Transportation Committee in the Illinois House, and he was nice enough to show up at the Stand Up for Transportation rally, even though that was primarily federal. He passed legislation for us within the last couple of weeks that gave us some cash flow flexibility of $400 million, I think is the amount, Jeremy. Another representative asked, well, what was that for? And Director Redden, immediately said, well, it's primarily to cover the $200-some million that the state owes us, so that we can continue to operate. That ended very quickly, that line of questioning in the House.
And that member said he needed to go back and change his vote, because I
Correct.
guess he
And the
voted
member
against
goes
it,
off.
and then he
If
changed.
I
He
would
was
have
a
known that's what it
downstate
was for, I
legislator.
would have voted for the legislation. Al Riley, for those of you who from the south suburbs, he continues to be a good counselor, and he's demanding, but he's a great counselor and leads us in the right direction. He does a lot of heavy lifting for all of us in the service boards. But let's think about mandates. I think he got a sympathetic ear from the governor's office, if not the legislature, on state mandates, and we'll go see the congressional delegation. I do want to point out that Stand Up for Transportation rally, that was a bipartisan rally, and that was good. It was healthy. And then the very next day, I think Leanne, Jeremy, and myself went out to see Congressman Roscom out in Barrington, in his Barrington office, primarily about transit parity. But Congressman Roscom's on the Ways and Means Committee, and he is a pretty critical player. So our congressional delegation works on transportation in a bipartisan fashion. And I think that's healthy, not only for transportation, but for everything. Thank you, Leanne, as always. Any other questions of her before we move on? Okay. Item 6 is the approval of contract and procurement items as they appear today on the board's agenda. There's 2 items. Can we take these together, or does the board want to separate them out? The first is yes, Blake.
I'd like to separate them out,
Okay,
please.
no problem. 6A is the first one, and that's an ordinance authorizing contracts for the trip planner migration, hosting, and support services. Is there discussion on that one or questions? Seeing none, and Director Melvin, welcome. Let's add Director Melvin, Audrey, Madam Secretary, if we could, to the rolls. So let's have a roll call on
We need a motion and a
6A
second.
if there's a motion.
make a motion.
Director McGallis moves that we approve 6A on the ordinance for trip planner migration, hosting and support services, seconded by Director Totten. With that, can we have a roll call?
Director Anderson,
Yes.
Director Buchanan,
Yes.
Director Colson,
Yes.
Director DeWitt,
Aye.
Director Durante,
Aye.
Director Frega, Director Fuentes,
Aye.
Director Hobson,
Yes.
Director McGallis, Director Melvin,
Yes.
Director Pang,
Yes.
Director Ross,
Yes.
Director Totten, Director Troiani,
Aye.
Chairman Dillard,
Yes.
15 ayes and 1 absent.
Great, and that will be so reported as passed. 6B is an ordinance authorizing task force or task orders, task order contracts for project management services. Is there discussion on that before we have a motion in a second? Yes, Director Hobson.
Yeah, my concern here is that with the oversight issues that have been problematic for all of the transportation boards in the last several years, my concern is that this is an abdication of oversight responsibility by the RTA, and I thought it would be appropriate to at least have a discussion on that item.
Okay. Director Frega.
I have a question on, we have $2 million allocated here. Is that a fee or is that on a time card? How is that paid? And what is that, how is that going to be distributed?
Can I ask maybe the board's indulgence, and actually Mark
Please.
Miner is here, who's the manager of this whole effort. Maybe if he could just spend a couple of minutes kind of just giving you a quick briefing, that might answer most or all of the questions, and then we can answer specific questions afterwards, if that's okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Leanne, and directors and Chairman Dillard. So the purpose of this item on the agenda is, and I think it piggybacks nicely with the conversation the board just had about mandates. We're often getting these types of projects, mandates that need to be implemented pretty quickly. And so to do that, the RTA really needs to maintain some agility, some ability, some flexibility, and as well as the ability to get things done quickly. We have a procurement process here that often on projects can take 3 to 4 months to go through the RFP process and to get through that process. And some of these mandates come with 60, 90, 180-day time windows to get things done. What we're looking for here is project management services. It's professional services. It's not getting projects done. It's about bringing people on very quickly through a competitive process. We've done an RFQ. For each project, we will go out again and offer and issue a task order. And then these 11 firms, if they're approved, will come back with proposals, and we'll choose the best proposal from that group. So by no means are we cherry-picking vendors and skirting the procurement process. But what we are doing is bringing these vendors on so that they can help us quickly get these projects up and running. A lot of these projects that we anticipate, and some in at least 2 out of the 3 that we've talked about that are listed in your memo, will involve probably other procurements, whether it's for an implementer, a software provider, something along those lines. And those procurements, as well, will go through our typical procurement process, which may involve an RFP, which will likely, if they meet the threshold, come back before the board. So we're looking for the contract we're talking about is over a 5-year period. So it's about averages out to about $400,000 a year for professional services for project management. And so in terms of the board and where the board's oversight comes in, obviously we can't do these projects unless they're budgeted. So through the annual budget process, there will be line items in the budgets for the whole project as a whole, which may include project management services. So that will obviously come before the board on an annual basis. We will also be providing regular updates. We will let the board know of any task order when it's issued and awarded. And I believe we are going to be starting a contract update process, at least on a quarterly basis. So you will get a lot of information on this as we move forward. These are projects generally that we don't necessarily have a choice in doing, either because they're mandates that are brought to us by the federal government or the state government, or they are major initiatives that you will be briefed on separately, such as the Integrated Mobility Management Program, and some of the other projects that we anticipate down the road. We don't know what's coming, which makes this very difficult and very little ambiguous, and I completely understand that. But what we are looking to do through this contract is just have on-call project managers to supplement and complement staff, and so we can initiate and get projects started quickly, and so we can go through the project scoping process, understand what we need to do, understand what resources we need to help get that done, so that we can meet deadlines, whether they be from legislative deadlines because contracts are expiring and things along those lines. So I do want to point out there was one slight I don't want to say error, but omission in this. We actually, out of the 11 contractors on this, we've recently found out that a 4th contractor is DBE certified. So 4 out of these 11 are DBE certified. The actual DBE goal will be set on a project-by-project basis. And so with that, I hope that answers some of your questions. Happy to answer more of them if you have.
And the focus here is to sort of provide us with additional resources, not necessarily a default to farming out every project sort of to one consulting firm to do sort of everything soup to nuts. The goal is to have, in many cases, talking about, say, the mass transit accessibility and transparency portal, we four agencies. RTA is responsible for delivering this transparency portal to everybody, a web-based portal. But we're working with the service boards. We've got lots of resources that we're bringing collectively to the table, but there's elements of this, systems integration, for example, that none of us all have the expertise in-house ready to plug into that process, as opposed to going out to sort of Accenture and say, deliver me the transparency portal, where they kind of start and build everything from scratch. We're actually trying to do this to create some efficiencies and actually ultimately save money in the way we deliver some of these responsibilities. And the point is, when we say $2 million, yes, I know that that's a large ticket item, but it is over 5 years. That's an up to amount. Annual budget appropriations would still have to occur. And each of these 11 firms are basically if they're brought on board with $0 amount at this point. So nobody's guaranteed any monies, and as Mark pointed out, until there actually is a specific assignment and a task order scope of work defined, which we then go out to this smaller pool of resources to get, time and material kind of responses and contracts. No, they don't get any monies until they actually sort of get approved for that specific task and that scope of work, and then they would be basically billing on work provided.
Leanne, if I may, this is similar to like the City of Chicago models. I mean, this has been done. You have a group of specialized skills focusing, on available. No one's guaranteed a contract. It really depends on what the needs are and how they arise. But you have a ready pool of consultants that can be brought in to supplement, again, as Leanne said, specialized skills. So it really makes you able to adapt to the changing circumstances. And certainly project management is part of our job, right, as the organization. But this is in addition to and as an on-needed basis. So this is very similar to some of the other models used, and we think it's a really great idea. There's a lot of things that are going to be going on, and we're a small organization, so all of those skills don't exist in-house.
Yes,
Sure.
Director Lewis. Welcome.
Leanne, relative to the DBE component, are those providers inclusive of minority business providers as well as the other categories that we care about? And are we looking at the amount of business that will be retained with them on an annual basis?
I don't have in front of me a list of the actual designation, the sub-designation for each of the 4 DBEs, but I can look that up and find out for you.
There is a mix between women-owned businesses as well as minority-owned businesses among those 4 that are denoted as DBE. And the 4th one, I will say, is 22nd Century Technologies. They were the one they didn't have the asterisk next to them, but we found out yesterday they were actually certified as a DBE.
And we'll be reviewing that annually to make sure we're the ones that are designated as MBE or DBE are getting business from or the opportunity to bid this work. I mean, if we found that they weren't qualified, we review and try and bring others into the equation. Is that correct?
So we will be setting the DBE goal for each project on a project-by-project basis. So as we go and say we're going to do the transparency and accountability portal, we will go through the process, identify what is the DBE goal on that specific task order, and they will be issued on that. These 4 firms will receive every task order. They will receive and will be given an opportunity to propose on it. We will obviously monitor them to make sure they continue to remain in the program, and we will continue on a project-by-project basis to make sure whether or not, even if there's a DB goal set and one of these 4 companies is not chosen as the prime, the prime that is chosen will have to complete a DB compliance plan to show that maybe they're bringing in a DB subcontractor. So it's not just these 4, but these 4 are prime. So if these 4 come and are able to get are awarded a task order, then it will be a DB prime working on a task order, which I think is really great for our organization.
Thank you.
Thanks, and Madam Secretary, add Director Lewis to the role, if you would.
Yes.
Director Freeman.
I'm a proponent of...
Microphone, please.
I'm a proponent of the construction management approach. We've used it very successfully in our business. The key to this is the monitoring, and you got to make sure that you get good people. And if you do, it usually ends up a very successful endeavor.
That's
So-
why I have Mark doing this. If there's anyone who's tenacious, that's him.
And what I will say is, when we did the RFQ, we did put out a request for qualifications as to identify. We got 19 responses, and through that review process of just really focusing on the qualifications of staff, the experience of the firms, the experience of the staff, we were able to not whittle it down, but we were able to identify these 11 as the most qualified firms. So we feel any of these 11 are highly qualified firms to provide us project management services. But we will review as we issue a task order. We will look at the actual staff that they're going to be providing on that team. And one of the things we are looking at and heavily will review is that they are certified as project managers, which is actually a highly regarded certification in the industry.
Great. Director Buchanan.
Yeah, along with the DBE legislation, my concern is are these Chicago companies? Are they state of Illinois companies? I mean, if we're going to follow and play by the rules, it would be nice to have Illinois and Chicago area contractors and project managers be involved in their homework over here, downtown Chicago, whether it be in the state of Illinois. Are they Illinois residents?
I believe the vast majorities of these, almost all of these companies have Chicago or Chicagoland offices.
I didn't ask that question. Are they located and owned by people in the city of Chicago or the state of Illinois? And every time I get a vendors list, it's all from out of state, New Jersey, et cetera. And my question is why can't we get Illinois and Chicago businesses involved in our business?
I'd have to go back and look at each one, but I don't have that information in front of me.
I would like to see that.
Yeah, Mark, just make sure Director Buchanan gets that. I'd like to see that too.
Yeah.
Although anybody's qualified to apply and go through this process. Any other questions?
Yes, sir.
Yes, Director Hobson.
So this ordinance doesn't eliminate or doesn't allow these 11 vendors. You've already approved them. They've gone through an RFP process, and we've already determined that they're qualified to provide the services that the RTA needs. One of the other concerns was expediency or time frame. This group meets every 30 days, so that certainly would fall within your 60, 180-day time frame. I'm not clear what this ordinance is actually buying the RTA. What are you getting?
So what we were getting is, in terms of an expediency issue, is that our normal RFP process takes 3 to 4 months. And that's...
But haven't you already done the RFP with these guys?
We did an RFQ.
Okay.
So, right, so if these contracts aren't approved, then for each project, we will have to, if we need outside services and they exceed the threshold for public bidding, which is now $40,000, so I would guess most of them would, we would then have to publicly post a procurement, go through the public process of a procurement for each individual project, which will likely take 3 to 4 months. Through this process, what we were able to do is the second we know that there's a new mandate or a project that we need to initiate, we can quickly put together a task order, issue it to these 11 firms, give them a reasonable window, maybe 2 to 3 weeks, to turn around a proposal, quickly review those, and then be able to initiate and really start that project in, I'd say, less than half the time that we would normally have to do through a conventional RFP process. So what that's buying us is, out of a 120 or 180-day mandate window of implementation, it's saving us 60 to 90 days.
And for that benefit, we're removing the normal process and board oversight. Is that accurate?
Can I jump
Yeah,
in?
yeah.
Please.
We're definitely not shortchanging the procurement process. Procurement comes under my purview, and as opposed to, this is actually slightly more robust procurement process than what we normally would do, because we've already had the sort of large public solicitation, as you mentioned earlier, that brought us the original 19 proposals. So now these same firms are going to be going through this process each time we have a new task order that needs to be issued. So they're going to be reviewed not once, but 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times, however many different projects we have, they're going to be reviewed again. So it's actually a more robust process, but because we're not issuing the task orders to the entire universe, it's a lot faster, and it'll make us more nimble.
So
And then in terms of oversight, you know we're coming back quarterly with those contract management reports that we discussed, I think, last month when I wasn't here. So you will have updates every single month in terms of the reports that you get electronically, but then the verbal reports that we're going to be delivering quarterly, you'll also be getting updates on each and every single task order contract that we enter into.
Are you done, Blake?
For the moment.
Okay, we'll come back to you if you need be. Director McGallis.
I guess one of the things that this brings to mind is if you have an allocation on a project, we've already done the appropriation, so the money's there, so we were involved in that. I guess what I hear Director Hobson talking a little bit about is the concern that if it's over $40,000 now and this process wasn't pre-approved and you had to go out to the market, and would you not be coming to the board and the board would be voting on a project of $100,000 or whatever? How do we address that issue if that is really the issue I'm hearing? I mean, if it could be a $500,000 project if that's what we've approved, and you could take that $500,000, you could go out to these pre-approved vendors, which I think is a great idea because it does streamline it. But I guess the question is, you could actually go out there and award a $500,000 contract to one of those eligible vendors, and the board not be involved in looking at that contract. How does that work?
So one of the things I will say is these, as I mentioned before, these are not project implementers. These are project management services. So we're looking at project management services to help us implement the project. A $500,000 project is probably going to require a separate contract for whoever's actually going to do the work to implement the project, whether it be launching a new mobility management program, whether it's implementing a data portal. So there will be other procurements that come along. A contract or a procurement is not a contract, or a project does not equal a procurement or a contract. Many projects, you will have multiple contracts. You may have a contract for project management services and a contract for project implementation services, or a software procurement, or actual goods or something along those lines that you need to implement your project. So on larger projects, this is just going to be one small piece of completing that larger project. I don't believe, in my estimation, that it would ever get to that level of expenditure of $500,000 on project management services.
That was an extreme amount, but let's assume it's over $40,000.
Sure. Yeah.
If the board's comfortable with it, that's fine. That's
100.
Over 100. Yeah. Should there be something out there as far as, hey, if this is a project you're going to go out and award to one of the people, and yes, you've gone out and now got a final proposal because you solicited it, back to the people that were pre-approved, and now it comes back and it's a $100,000 project or some amount. Should it come back to the board for review? I guess before you award it. That's the question that I have. I don't know the answer to it.
Thank you for stating it more eloquently than I did.
How do you answer Director McGallis's question, Leanne? How do you answer Director McGallis's question?
The way it's constructed right now is, like Nadine said, we wouldn't be required, the way the ordinance is structured now, to come back to you for every single item. But we have anticipated through a variety of different approaches through the annual budget process for these, because these large projects end up as line items in the budget. So the board gets to see that on an annual basis in advance of any big projects moving forward. And then the compliance reports that we have will be giving to the board on a regular basis. So, I mean, that's the way it's constructed now. If the board is not comfortable with that, we could do something different. For example, you could amend the ordinance verbally now to say that you're good with everything up to 100,000, but if there's a line item that's more than 100,000, that you want us to put it on the agenda for that specific approval at that next board meeting. We could do that. That probably adds a month to the process, which we were trying to sort of shorten up a little bit, but that could be something that we could do if the board, that would be the only other remedy I could see.
Well, given the scrutiny that we've had, I would certainly be more comfortable with an approach that the executive director suggests.
What's your thought about that, Mark?
I mean, I'm willing to do whatever the board wants. I think there's a variety of ways we can do this through formal approval, or we're definitely. I mean, it was always been our intention to let you guys know of any task order that has been awarded, and obviously you guys have direct lines to Leanne.
Does it mess you up if we hold this for one more month? Is there anything on here that's got to go in the next 30 days?
The transparency portal is something we've got a pretty much a tight deadline to our head. I mean, I don't see any issue with doing a verbal amendment to the ordinance to, add in just the additional request that if it's over 100, we bring it back to the board. And then an additional way to think about this is it could either be, or you could undo it. Even if we went ahead, we would still brief you on it if you didn't like it, we could be sort of ahead of you 2 weeks or 3 weeks, but we'd still be bringing it to the board, and in theory, the board could undo that task order and sort of stop us from proceeding any further. That might be a little bit messy, but
I like the 100,000.
Yeah,
better.
I think some check and balance of $100,000 sounds reasonable. You'd be able to, in most cases, go right ahead with the contract. We do meet every 30 days. And we also have the emergency clauses that we could activate if we needed to. So if there was a project of that type of caliber. But I don't know, do you want to make a motion?
Yes, I would like to make a motion that we limit it to $100,000.
Motion by Director Hobson that on its face we amend it to limit it to 100,000, seconded by Director McAllis.
Can I just clarify
Yes.
that we're not actually limiting the work to 100,000. We would limit the staff, the sort of my authority to execute up to 100,000. Beyond 100,000, we're still following the same process, going to this pool of 11, but bring it back to you for approval at the subsequent board meeting.
That would be my motion.
That's my purpose of the seconding, that we would do it the way you're describing it. We'll monitor it. If we find it's creating a problem, we can always, fine tune it later on. I mean, if it is creating a problem, at least we'll be more involved, and we'll be responsible for looking at it again down the road.
Okay.
Yes, Director Johnson.
Question. How many situations would you expect to be that we will have that's under $100,000 or over $100,000 in a given year?
Well, the actual work, I don't know. I mean, Mark, what do you think on the transparency portal? Do we think it's going to be over 100?
I think so. We've really
That's probably
identified
the
at this
biggest one we've
point
got right now.
we've identified 3 projects that we think right off the bat we'll utilize these contracts for. Out of those, I say only one of the 3 will likely be over 100,000 for project management services. And so, it's hard to tell moving forward because we don't know what additional projects due to mandates or legislative actions will need to be taken. But I foresee the vast majority being around or under $100,000.
Okay. We'll do the roll call, if it's okay, orally on the amendment of Director Hobson. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and we will amend it on its face that way. Any more discussion on the actual 6B ordinance for this morning's agenda? If not, I need a motion and a second. Is there a motion to adopt it? Yes, Director Ross makes the motion. We adopt 6B on our agenda as it's been amended. Is there a second? Seconded by Director Friga. And with that, Madam Secretary, will you take the roll, please?
Yes. This is on the 6B task order ordinance as just amended. Director Anderson,
Yes.
Director Buchanan,
Yes.
Director Colson,
Yes.
Director DeWitt,
Yes.
Director Durante,
Yes.
Director Frega,
Aye.
Director Fuentes,
Aye.
Director Hobson,
Yes.
Director Lewis,
Yes.
Director McGallis,
Aye.
Director Melvin,
Yes.
Director Pang,
Yes.
Director Ross, Director Totten,
Aye.
Director Troyani, Chairman Dillard,
Yes.
16 ayes.
16 ayes, it'll be so reported, and thank you, Blake, very much for, I very much appreciate, when directors do what they're supposed to do, and that's direct, ask questions, so I thank you very much for your input in that and making that ordinance better. Item 7 is the consent items that they appear on today's board agenda. Does the board want either of these taken separately, or can we do 7A, which is an ordinance adopting annual attachments to the letters of understanding regarding the regional 2015 formula funds, and 7B, the ordinance amending the 2015 capital program or amendment. Those okay to do together? Director DeWitt moves we approve those two. Is there a second? Seconded by Director Michael Lewis. And with that, is there leave for the last roll call?
16 ayes.
Yes, seeing no objection, Madam Secretary, reported as approved with the concurrence of the board of 16 to nothing on both of the ordinances in item number 7. Is there on item 8 are new issues for the board? Anything anybody wants to raise? Seeing nothing or none there. Did Mr. Blakemore come in? Just want to make sure Mr. Blakemore, who asked to testify publicly, has his opportunity if he wants to. I want to remind the board that the next scheduled meeting is May 21st. It's hard to believe we will already be in the month of May. Starting with committees as always at 8:30 and followed by the board meeting whenever the committees are finished. Item number 9 is the executive session, and Nadine, you want to cite the exception for the closed session?
If the board is willing to take a vote to adjourn into executive session pursuant to Section 2C1 of the Open Meetings Act, we could then do so and adjourn at this time.
And I don't think, if there are no objections by the board, and since there will not be action coming out of our executive session, I would entertain a motion and a second to adjourn so that the members of the public and staff can go back to work or whatever they wish to do. Is there a motion to adjourn? Director Fuentes moves that we adjourn, seconded by Director Pang. All those in favor signify by going into the executive session, and we are adjourned. Thank you.